Here. So with that, I would like to introduce the Congressman for closing remarks, and then I'll have Ed Powers come up and we'll talk about the tours. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, you were correct about being a little concerned about being on top of the technology. However, I've now had a 45-minute course, and I really, really appreciate it. That was really good. Those presentations were really excellent. I just hope that 534 others would have the opportunity to observe what I just had this opportunity. It'd make a difference. Knowledge is really important, but not often found in my workplace. So it's a problem, an ongoing problem. I was thinking about timing and navigation on the way over here. I had it all figured out. Now, we were here in Washington during the Clinton administration. I was Deputy Secretary of the Department of Interior and not dealing with all of this stuff, but some other things. And my wife was over at the Peace Corps running some of the programs there. So we're familiar with navigation and timing in Washington, right? So, okay, we're at Capitol Hill. We can go down through Pence. We get over to Mass Avenue and go through Midtown. No. We're going to go down Independence and up Rock Creek and shoot right up Mass Ave, right? The Park Service is really screwing up on that road. The eastbound lanes just to the north, or to the east, I'm getting my navigation here correct, to the east of the new Memorial, down to one lane. And so it's stop and go from the Indian Museum all the way through to what we now call the Korea War Museum. Navigation and timing are really, really important if you want to get to your function on time. We had the right idea, but we had the wrong on-the-ground issues. That's a metaphor for what we're faced with. And for those of you that were here tonight, and I hope many, many others, had the opportunity to listen carefully to the presentations. Somewhere along the lane, Dana, you came into my office. Somebody asking me, how did you, well, one of my staff who were here in the room, how did you get into this? And I said, I don't know, this guy wandered into the office and said, we got a problem. And you did. I thank you so very much for wandering into the office. I've just been named as the ranking member of the Coast Guard Maritime, and I'm going, why me? And it was open, and I said, sure, I'd love to be a ranking member, and they said, fine, here you go. I have had the pleasure and really the opportunity for more than 40 years of attending the greatest university in the world, and that's called the legislature, where experts, like all of you in this room, will come into my office, and as long as I can take the absorption of your knowledge, you'll spend that time with me. And I'm very, very blessed to have had that opportunity. And I've got another 45 minutes of it here today, and I'm going to go back and take out my high school books and go, where was I when they should have been listening to all that wave stuff? But we've got a problem. This is not a new problem. This problem has been known since the late 90s. And studies were done by perhaps some of you in the room in the late 90s and go, well, this GPS is really cool, really awesome. But what if it's not available? So in 1998, President Clinton issued an order, NSC, which I think stands for National Security Council Order such and such, and said, we have to have a backup. That was 1998. And then the inevitable federal government time took over. The interaction of experts trying to figure out how to carry out that order. So it was actually about 3 years later, in August of 2001, actually the 29th of August, that a report emanated. Anybody involved in this room was involved in that report? I see some hands shyly going up. Come on, I know, it was an important report, it really was. And he said, we got a problem. We got to do something about it. And about it happened 12 days later, 13 days later, 9/11. And everything went off the rails and other things became priorities. And it was then 5 years later that this problem was once again taken up. New studies, ELRN became the solution, and then the inevitable federal system of time took hold. And here we are. Here we are. 1998 to 2015, the intervening different studies, different iterations of this problem coming back, and the solution going, well, yeah, that solution was out there. Maybe we ought to study it again. And Sarah, I heard you say that. I walked into this room and I heard you say, we need to study this again. I'm here to tell you, it's time for us to implement this now. This has to be done. This really has to be done. And if I find the Department of Transportation doing yet another study of all the studies that have been done in the past, I'm going to raise hell. I really am. Because we cannot let this go any longer. This has to be done, and it can be done. And while it may not be the cesium clock that some of my folks, I'm on what is called the Strategic Arms Subcommittee of the House Armed Services Committee, and we get deep into this stuff, probably much of which I know I can't discuss here. But there are those who said we can have a little time clock walking around, or not walking around, but on every piece of equipment out there. And I'm going, you think so? No, that's not going to happen. Not anytime soon, and not within anybody's budget. But this can happen. And when it does happen, then the single point of failure for most everything in this nation that's important, including being able to find out what my wife is doing in Texas at my daughter-in-law's uncle's funeral. It gets down to be really personal. The ability for this smartphone to work won't, if that single point of failure happens. And for those of you that watch and read the various periodicals that are in the public domain, we are in the Star Wars era. We are in the Star Wars era. And those things, you saw those wonderful little circles around the globe, they don't work. And if they're not working, this country won't work and our military won't work. Period. It won't happen. I met Monday with the command structure of the Travis Air Force Base in California. This is air mobility. C-5As or C-5Ds and Cs now, and C-17s and KC-10s and Sioux KC-46s, and all around the world, and all the things that need to be done. I said, if the GPS isn't available, what happens? And then I asked, how many of you know what a sextant is? And a chronometer. 3 of the 9 raised their hand. Trained in navigation without GPS. The rest have no idea where they are or where they're going. This is serious. This is really, really serious. And the really good part of this is we don't need to wait for another study. You just saw it. You just saw the Crater 1 and 2. You saw the results of it here in, I don't know, whatever the hell that thing is. This is at hand and it's available to us. I was talking to some folks today about the way in which we can move from knowledge, which you just saw on the screens, to implementation. It's like, how do you get there? Well, first of all, you go to where the money is. I love the Department of Transportation. Coast Guard, perfect organization. Flat out, no money. However, oh, I love the Department of Defense. Over $600 billion. And not a nickel for a backup system. Something's wrong with that equation. Over $600 billion annually and not a nickel for a backup system so that my C-17s can find their way from Fairfield, California, Travis Air Force Base to God knows where on this planet. So, I've got a little piece of legislation. H.R. 1678, it says, the Department of Defense shall get on with this. What's it take? I don't know, one estimate, I don't know, this is now a year and a half, maybe 2 years old. A huge chunk of that $600 billion plus dollars, like 1/100th%, $40 million, to put back in place 7 of those towers. I hadn't thought about just 4, but let's go for 7. One, just outside my district at Lake County. You can go up and see the geysers, you can play around in the lake. Somebody's going to go up there once every 70 days to make sure the thing's working. Come on, this is really a no-brainer, folks. And I think after the discussions I had today with some folks that think that they ought to build this stuff, I said, you're not talking to me about the commercial aspect of this system. And then we talked about the commercial aspect of the system. And I'm going, somebody can make a lot of money on the commercial aspects of an E-Lorraine system. I go, what if some of that money were split with the federal government on its investment of $40 million, and maybe we can get a return that some of those gamblers on Wall Street with their high-frequency trading are now able to scam the rest of us in the stock market. And we get some of that money and we can have a little enterprise going. Public-private partnership, sending data out to the basement of the U.S. Naval Observatory on a wave that will actually go through concrete. Shall I tell you about my experience with long waves? Well, I will. Seems as though the U.S. Navy has a mechanism of communicating with submarines using long waves, very long waves. In my district, and I was then a senator, there was a certain whale that got lost in the Delta of California. It seems as though that whale decided that the way to go home was to follow a low-frequency wave emanating from the U.S. Naval radio station outside Dixon, California. How that whale managed to get as close to that station where the water was probably 6 or 7 feet deep and the whale was like 14 feet, but that's where the whale was. And so it was stuck. We worked for some 40 days to get it out, got nowhere. Somebody said, well, maybe he's homing in on that low-frequency signal that the U.S. Navy was sending out to its boomers someplace out in the Pacific. And the genius that I am said, well, maybe so. Why don't we shut down that radio station and see if the whale leaves? So we contacted our congressman back here, Vic Fazio, and said, tell the Navy to shut down the Navy had a serious hiccup. We can't do that. The Russians will attack. Maybe yes, maybe no. But I said, the whale's there. Would you like to be on television explaining why you won't let the whale go home? So we got a call from the Navy and said, okay, why don't you get ready and we'll give you 30 minutes. So now we need 1 hour. We negotiated for 5 days. We got 35 minutes. And at a certain moment, they said go, and we went. Interestingly, the whale left, turned around and headed back to San Francisco Bay and out to the ocean. What does that mean? It means that the E-Lorraine system, with its very, very low frequency, is an extraordinary communication device. And why we do not have it now has everything to do with time. It's called the federal government time. And that is, you find a problem, you study. Time passes, you make a declaration of need and you have some presidential order. Time passes, another president shows up. We study it a little more. Time passes and we have another president show up.